Mom. Hello, everybody. Can I talk? You can come on back. Bertie, please. We're at Plenary 4, for those of you who have forgotten your numbers. And we're talking about safe communities, safe children. I want to thank you for hanging out as long as you have. I hope you had a good little break there. We'll move around a little bit. So we're going to have 3 great people to talk to you again. Brooke Istook from the Thorn, which I'll introduce them all in a second. Juliet Oliver, who's a DDA with the Sexual Assault Unit here at Orange County. And Christine Snapper, not in this order, of course, who's our Division Director of Social Service Agency, SSA here in Orange County again. No surprise. So we are going to go with Brooke, then Christine, then Juliet, who promises to wrap it all up in a bow. I guess, I mean, I don't know. But in the meantime, let me start introducing our first speaker. Brooke Istook is the Vice President of Youth and Communities at Thorn. Brooke is a tech nonprofit dedicated to developing technology to defend children from sexual abuse. She leads Thorn's prevention work focused on promoting healthy, safe online experiences by building resilience in youth and the communities that support and protect them. Brooke joined Thorn in 2014 to build and launch its first software product, Spotlight, a human trafficking investigations tool that is now used by officers across the US and Canada and has been used to identify over 17,000 trafficking victims over the last 5 years. In 2019, Brooke led the launch of Thorn's youth-centered research and digital programs to combat the growth of online grooming and other digital harms with a goal to empower youth and their support systems with knowledge and tools to fight online child sexual abuse. With multiple viral videos, Thorn's No Filter program for youth and online resource for parents have presented educational and prevention messaging to youth and parents on social media over 300 million times. Wow, rock and roll. With over 170 million again, videos. I feel like Dr. Evil when I'm saying that, million video views across TikTok, Instagram, Snap, and YouTube. Prior to joining Thorn, Brooke spent 12 years in business consulting, human resources, and program management for global tech consulting companies, Accenture and Cognizant, and supporting Fortune 500 clients in telecommunications and entertainment. She's a busy young lady. So without further ado, Brooke.
Thank you very much. I'm really happy to be here. And as I've sat here today, I've really been impressed by the holistic approach that this conference has taken to talking about children and trafficking and the issues that we need to be thinking about to keep them safe. And so today, I'm actually going to talk about a little bit of a different subject in terms of how are our children doing and how are they doing in their online lives. Okay, let me make sure I know how to use this. Okay, here we go. I want to start off by telling you a story about Riley. She's a shy 12-year-old who makes all A's, plays soccer, and has a small group of friends. She just started middle school and also just got her first phone. And now she's on it on day and night on apps like Snap and TikTok, hanging out and chatting with her friends. Jake is a handsome 8th grader. He's in her drama class, and they recently started texting. After a while, Jake asked her to send him a cute pic. She takes a fun selfie and sends it back. He then asks for something a little more sexy. She's hesitant at first, but eventually he convinces her to send him a nude or a naked selfie. Jake then shares it with his buddy, who then turns around and shares it in a group chat. Of course, then it starts spreading around the school. As her image is spreading, Riley is in an all-out panic. She's humiliated and ashamed and devastated by Jake's betrayal. She can't tell her parents because she knows they'll be furious with her, and frankly, she's far too mortified. As her image continues to spread, it eventually breaks outside the bounds of the school into the broader community and starts circulating online. Back at school, messages swirl around, calling Riley a slut and all sorts of names. At home, she's becoming withdrawn and depressed. Her parents want to know what's wrong, but she just pushes them away. She just wants to hide from the world and make it stop. Now, our story today started with just two middle schoolers who initially exchanged explicit images and then they were shared without consent. But other online harms similar to this are things like online grooming, where there's an adult perpetrator who befriends a child online, often lying about who they are or their age, and coerces them to send intimate images or photos for similar reasons in some cases. Other things that you should be aware of is this thing called capping, where it can be a peer or an adult perpetrator that non-consensually records or takes screenshots of a live stream. And any of these situations, Riley's and Jake's or online grooming, can escalate into what's called sextortion, where a peer or even an adult perpetrator threatens to share or expose intimate images in order to get the child to do something that they want, whether it's create more images or videos, give them money, meet up in person, or otherwise. And unfortunately, these types of situations are happening more often than we might realize. There was a global survey done by We Protect recently that surveyed 18 to 20-year-olds across the world to understand what the prevalence was of online harmful sexual experiences. And about 50% of those 18 to 20-year-olds had experienced some sort of exploitative childhood sexual experience online. And that number rose to 70% for folks in the US. And the truth is that as scary as these situations might sound, kids today are having to navigate childhood and completely normal, but vulnerable and complicated developmental stages like puberty with devices, cameras, and a never forgetting globally connected internet in the mix. And I, for one, did not have to grow up that way. So these things are likely going to happen. There's a significant risk that they may happen to our children or to their friends. So we just need to prepare them for it. So how do we do that? At Thorn, as you heard, our mission is to build technology to defend children from online sexual abuse. It's our job to know the pitfalls of tech, the dark side as it relates to children and child sexual exploitation. And then we build software for law enforcement, for tech companies, and we build tools for families and children to be able to fight back and enjoy safer online experiences. And over the last 3 years, my team has spent a bunch of time investing in research to understand how kids themselves experience these online issues. So we've done focus groups, surveys with kids aged 9 to 17 across the United States to understand what their experience is like, what vulnerabilities are at play, how do they feel about these things, and what motivates their online behaviors. And today I want to spend time talking to you guys about what I've learned over the last 3 years and what we all need to know to keep our kids safe online. The first thing to know is that it's happening a lot younger than we might think. We launched this program called No Filter, which Derek talked about, where we produce TikTok videos, YouTube, Instagram videos to start to spark online dialogue with teens and tweens on social platforms to start talking about these issues, remove stigma, and educate them about these risks. And one of our most viral videos, I don't know if you can see it, but is this one. And this is actually a father and daughter playing a game, flipping over cards and asking awkward questions. And this question, which is, how old were you the first time you were asked for nudes? This particular question was featured in multiple videos. And every time we post a video on this, it goes viral over and over again. And what's happening in those moments is that young people are piping up and they're saying, this happened to me, and I know this experience. We had over 20,000 kids or young people respond to these videos and tell us about their experience. And I just want to read a couple things that they said. I was like 12 and he was 30. I didn't understand about the age thing at the time. I was 9 and he was 14. 9 and I'm a guy. First asked at 11, first sent at 12, and it was because I felt I had to. Because the guy was guilt tripping me, I was naive and caved. When we look at the stats from our research, nearly 1 in 4 9 to 12-year-olds reported having had an online sexual interaction with someone they believed to be an adult. And 1 in 6 had actually sent their own nudes. That's 9 to 12-year-olds. And while every child is different, we do know that starting at around age 7 and 8, kids are naturally interested in exploring, curious about their bodies. They're also interested in imitating older kids and adults, right? So when you layer in this curiosity with devices and cameras and unfettered access to all sorts of people online, we're putting them in situations they're fundamentally unprepared to handle. The second thing to know is that whether it's sexting with a crush or flirting with adults online, the boundaries between safe and unsafe interactions gets really tricky online. The beauty of the internet is the capacity to get outside of your immediate world, to explore, to make new friends, to learn new things. And kids are regularly connecting with people they know through games, through mutual friends, and for shared interest. And they don't consider them strangers. So stranger danger language doesn't translate so well, similar to age gaps. So imagine Riley met Jake online, and remember she's 12. And instead of being in 8th grade, he was a handsome 19-year-old, handsome 25-year-old maybe. It gets a little confusing when things move into the digital world. From our research, we know that for many kids across the entire age span, chatting and flirting with adults they met online was considered normal. About half of the kids who had shared their own nudes had shared them with someone they only had met online, so they never met them in person. And about 41% of them shared them with someone they believed was an adult. Seemingly innocent flirtation and friendship can quickly turn traumatic if a child is coerced into sharing images or their intimate images are shared without consent. Oops. All right. Final thing to remember is that whether it was a consensual nude that was shared initially innocently, but then reshared without consent, or an online stranger who became a friend, who then turned into an abuser, shame is what's keeping kids from reaching out for help when they need it. These harmful online sexual situations can cause an intense amount of humiliation and shame for children. And in stories like Riley's, we know that they can lead to depression, self-harm, and even suicide. And unfortunately, victims like Riley aren't wrong for being concerned about getting help. Because over 50% of the kids and parents that we survey blame the child in a photo when an image is leaked. In an effort to protect our kids and warn them of the risks of sharing nudes, we say things like, don't send nudes because if it gets out, it's your fault, or you shouldn't have sent it in the first place. And not that there's not a place for that conversation, but in framing it that way, we unintentionally place the harmful actions of others on their shoulders. So we got to think about and change how we go about having these conversations so that we can shift these cultures of shame and blame that keep victims of online harm silent. Now, I know this is a lot, and as a parent of 3 children under 8, it can be very overwhelming to think about. I heard one researcher say, had done some research with parents, and they were like, I don't even know how to protect my children in their bedroom anymore, because the digital world is bringing these types of dangers really close to home. So it can be very overwhelming. But the solution is not as complicated as we might think. The most important thing is to start having early, frequent, and judgment-free conversations with kids about digital safety. While it is important to put practical safeguards like limiting chat and things like that in place for younger children, we have to start talking to them about these situations before they happen. And we know they can start as early as 7, 8, and 9 years old. You can start by being curious, asking questions about their online lives, encouraging them to make informed decisions. And at those younger ages, they're actually open to sharing about their experience. So it's an important time to start to lay that foundation. Last summer, we launched Thorn for Parents. It's a resource for parents online to help them start to have these conversations. It's discussion guides, conversation starters to help guide parents on what to talk about at which stage and understand the various stages of development as it relates to tech. So those younger ages, it's understanding red flags. It's learning to trust their gut and protecting theirs and other people's private information. The second thing to do is to keep talking. As they get older, embrace the awkward, because they probably don't want to talk about it, but keep talking about it. And that's when you need to start talking about things like healthy online relationships and digital consent, and getting into the topics like sharing and resharing nudes. And the last and one of the most important pieces is to remove shame. I heard a survivor of online grooming talk recently. She was 13 years old when she was groomed online by someone she thought was part of a modeling agency. She was coerced into sharing images, and then the perpetrator threatened to share her images in order to force her to meet in person where she was sexually assaulted. It broke my heart to hear of all the moments between when he started threatening her to when he forced her to meet in person, where she almost told an adult what was going on, but she didn't, because she was convinced that she would get in trouble or it was her fault. So we have to talk to our kids about these issues. By talking about it, we show them that it's safe to talk about, it's okay to talk about, and that we love them and that there's hope to get to the other side. And what we're hoping for is for a new ending to Riley's story. So what if Riley's parents and teachers had talked to her many times about these issues? She may have tried to handle it herself at first, but when things really started to spiral out of control, she went and got their help. They asked if she was okay, asked her how she wanted to handle it, and helped her get beyond that moment and see to the other side. But what if one of Jake's friends did something different? What if his teachers and his coaches and his parents drilled into his head that it was wrong to share other people's intimate images? And instead of spreading the image, he called out his friends in the group chat. Even more ideal, what if most of the kids at Riley's school felt that resharing someone else's nude said more about the resharer than the person in the image? While she might have definitely been embarrassed still, instead of being slut-shamed, a network of support would have come around her to build her resilience and remove her shame. A world where every child is free to be a kid, to explore, to make mistakes, is a world where we're preparing them for these situations before they happen, and we lay a foundation of trust so they can get help when they need it. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much, Brooke. Next is Christine Snapper. She's Division Director, Social Services Agency, Children and Family Services. Christine has over 31 years experience with the SSA. Christine has a strong foundation in the SA and has overseen multiple areas of agency ensuring services to at-risk families. Christine's experience includes her involvement with initiative projects such as early development and coordination of the OC Family Resource Center platform in partnership with community stakeholders for prevention services in the community. SSA's Mutual Clients Linkages Project, California's Continuum of Care Reform, Orange County's Group Home Providers Transition to Short-Term Residential Treatment Program, AB 74, which focused on stepping children down to family-based care, the creation of a CSEC resource and support services contract to meet the needs of exploited youth, development and implementation of the visitation coaching program, and oversight of SB 528, which led to a policy providing reproductive health and parenting information for foster youth. Without further introduction, Christine.
I'm like Sandy, he said, height wise, right? Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am the Division Director with Orange County Social Services, Children and Family Services Department. And when we talk about safe communities and safe children, I really find that to be my role. My role is to ensure that all children here in Orange County are safe. So as we look at a roadmap of what Children and Family Services does here in Orange County, it really does tie into this topic today. And the values that we hold in terms of Children and Family Services is really looking at strengthening our families and providing them resources and support. Our goal is really to partner with each family that we come in contact with, and the partnership is really about how do we together ensure child safety. And it is looking at protection issues. So I'm going to walk you through our system today and what we do when a child comes before us. It's a brief little roadmap of what happens when someone calls the child abuse hotline and how Children and Family Services steps in to, one, provide preventative services if possible. And then sometimes we do have to provide intervention. And those interventions are working more intensely with the family. So the first entry to our system is a child abuse registry, and some of you may be very familiar with that. But anytime someone in the community has a concern about a child, we ask that people call the hotline. And we ask people to do that because some people may not be trained to identify what is truly a child abuse issue or might be something that is taken out of context. And so we have mandated reporters and non-mandated reporters call the hotline so that we can take the information, assess the information, and decide how we're going to triage or send some assistance out. And annually, I can tell you in 2021, we got about 3,790 calls a month. So if you can imagine, that's a large number of calls that come through the hotline, really identifying kids that might be at risk of something or in fact, actually having some safety concerns. And so the registry takes these calls, it's 24/7, and the number's on the screen, but it's 24/7, and we have staff that work 24/7 because our priority is to ensure our children are safe here in Orange County. Along with taking the information, they're doing some assessments, they're reviewing the information, but there's also an opportunity that if it doesn't meet the threshold of what child abuse laws and legislation entail, we can give resources and referrals and try to link people to agencies in the community that might be better able to assist them. Because we don't want to intervene unless we absolutely have to. So the registry really does a great job at looking at the information coming in and what do we do with the information? How do we assess it in order to make the best determination for the child? The next point of entry for our system is emergency response. There's a lot on the screen, but due to time, it really is about a worker who gets assigned from the hotline, who goes out and makes a home call or a school call, depending on the situation, to interview the child, find out some specifics of what's going on, and investigate the allegation. Because remember, it's an allegation. So we don't know if we have a safety issue until we interview all parties that are related to this child. But also looking at investigations, we don't do this in a vacuum. In many cases, we partner with law enforcement. In many cases, we might go out with a public health nurse because we need other professionals to help us determine what's the best situation, what's the best area, what's the best focus for that child, and just expertise in things that we may not be a specialist in. Once a child's determined to be at risk, and we decide that we need some juvenile court intervention, the next step to our system is dependency investigations or dependency intake. I'm going to blend this slide with the next one, but it is really looking at if a child comes to our attention and needs protection, whether it's from a parent or perhaps a legal caretaker that is taking care of them, we may look to file a petition before the juvenile court. And that petition is really asking the court to look at the safety of this child and give us some time to be able to put some things into place. So some of the options is we could leave a child with their family because perhaps the safety and the risk is not in the immediate family. We might have to detain the child, which means we might remove the child from the family's care for the moment. It's a temporary removal. And then we might even release a parent to perhaps another parent or another relative if it's safe to do so. And some of the things that we really look at again is working with our partnering agencies, law enforcement, the schools, anyone that might have information to help us look at how do we best help and serve this family. Dependency investigation is also a little more of an in-depth look. So as we look at helping the family and partnering, some of the areas that the court may look at when they make a ruling on child safety is whether a child gets to stay with the family, which is family maintenance, or whether a child returns to the family, which is family reunification. And in both of these, the responsibility and the role is really to help the family gather all of the things and supports that they need to strengthen their family composition. Sometimes it's parenting classes, sometimes it's counseling, sometimes it's attending maybe a batterers treatment program for the offender in the home, but it's also tending to the needs of the child. Again, focusing on child safety, focusing on ensuring that the child gets what they need. And this would apply to any child up to the age of 18. And I'll speak a little bit more because sometimes we have foster youth who stay with us till they're 21. And again, offering resources and supports for them so that they're able to get their needs met. We also have an area called permanency services, and permanency services is where some of these children may not be able to return home. So helping them become independent adults, helping them get resources and services that they need so that they're able to strengthen themselves and the situation the family is in also. So some of the services we offer are resource family liaisons. These are services where someone will be identified to the family that can connect with them, give them resources, support them through difficult times. We also have family resource centers in the community, and there's some pamphlets over here on the side of the family resource centers that are here in Orange County. I encourage you to take those so that you can see what's out in the community. But we also have assistance at independent living programs for kids, and also looking at various other meetings to really help gauge the family and ensure strength and support. This is what the child dependency process system really looks like overall. So you have the top box where that's the registry where everyone calls in if they have a concern. And then you have the second box, which is our emergency response program that makes the initial assessment and decides whether court intervention is needed. And then you see two boxes under that. One says court and one says family preservation services. And the family preservation services are voluntary. That is another resource that we offer families when they're going through difficult times related to abuse allegations. Sometimes they just need a little support. They need a social worker to come visit them and to help them get connected to resources. And in this particular area, we don't have child safety issues. The child is safe in the home with supportive services to help the family be intact. When you look at the lower two rows of boxes, those are court interventions. And those are the things that I mentioned where we're really monitoring and supervising to make sure kids are safe. So some of the resources and supports in looking at safe families, safe communities, the things that we really offer families is childcare assistance when they're a part of our system, counseling referrals to help strengthen the trauma and the experiences that some children may endure. Also to deal with the issues that Brooke just talked about too, in terms of shame, right? Because any disclosure of an allegation is difficult for a child just automatically. We also have assistance in terms of housing assistance. We have grants and allocations through the state that can help families who may be experiencing homelessness. And what we want to do is if a family is experiencing homelessness, and perhaps that's the reason they can't have their child back, we want to eradicate that reason. And so we want to be able to provide them with assistance to be able to get a home so that they're able to bring their children back to them. We also partner with Faith in Motion. We have a very strong relationship with our faith-based community here in Orange County. It's a wonderful relationship for us because they really do step in and help us provide resources and items that families might need that we might not be able to ascertain or gather. So that relationship is incredibly important and strong with us. Basic needs assistance and discretionary funds. Sometimes you just need a bed. Sometimes you need some basic things in order to help you in a situation where you may have commercially sexually exploited children or human trafficking. It may be moving to a new location or a house, and we're able to kind of help provide some financial assistance to be able to do that to keep the family intact. Interpretation services, we know that Orange County is very diverse, so we also have that ability to be able to make sure that families and children understand what's being said to them. And then we also have tutoring services. And again, the family resource centers are also out in the community. Many of the other partnerships, again, FACT, which is our Family Resource Center platform, has many partners related to them. And if you pick up a pamphlet, you'll see all of the agencies that are out there providing resources in the communities where the families live. So every region of Orange County, there's 16 family resource centers. Some regions may have more than one FRC, but they're really there in the community so that families can access them right where they live. They don't have to drive there. They don't have to be transported there. Other things we have too for our foster youth is that we have a FERS, which is our Family Urgent Response Services. And that's where there's an immediate need for some assistance and support to keep families intact and kids in placement. And so we are able to offer that 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Wraparound Orange County, also another partnership with probation and healthcare agency, really looking at how do we provide services to families to keep them together. We're also very active in our ICWA and our tribal representation. Orange County does not have an active tribe in our county, but we work with many of the tribes because we have families that have tribal connections here in this county. So that's also a resource and support that we offer the families that come in contact with us. And then I think one of the biggest efforts we've done recently too was specific to a lot of the topics that you're talking about in the conference is services related to our commercially sexually exploited children, human trafficking victims. We have partnered with several organizations in Orange County, work closely also with Vanguard in really addressing the work that's being done for our CSEC youth out in the community. Really grateful for all the resources, but again, we're not the sole driver of all of this. It is definitely a community partnership. It's definitely something that we work with everybody on to really be able to ensure that our community and our children are safe. And so we welcome any future partnerships with anybody who is interested also in helping us. So thank you so much for the opportunity to share with you some of the intervention services that we have here in Orange County.
Thank you, Christine. Juliet Oliver is a deputy district attorney again with sexual assault unit in the Orange County District Attorney's Office. She received her Juris Doctorate from Pepperdine School of Law in 2008 after receiving her BA degree in criminology, law, and society from the University of California, Irvine. Annie, okay, you too. Not that particular degree, but whatever. She has been a deputy district attorney for the Orange County District Attorney's Office since November 2008 and is currently assigned to the sexual assault unit. In March 2016, she joined the Human Exploitation and Trafficking Heat Unit, where she stayed until 2020. While there, Juliet specialized in the prosecution of cases involving pimping, pandering, and human trafficking of both adults and minors. She worked closely with law enforcement agencies and juvenile court She worked closely with the law enforcement agencies and juvenile court, collaborate bodies statewide to secure such convictions and to provide support and resources to victims. Juliet has trained on the topic of investigation and prosecution of human trafficking cases to law enforcement and other agencies locally and across the state. Since moving to the sexual assault unit in March of 2020, Juliet handles a caseload and specializes in both child molestation and adult sexual assault. Since June 2020, Juliet served as a prosecutor in the prosecutor's seat for the California Children's Justice Act Task Force within the Governor's Office of Emergency Services. Her work and experience there focuses on improving the handling, investigation, and prosecution of child sexual abuse, neglect, and exploitation cases statewide. Juliet, come and wrap it up with a bow.
That was the biggest challenge today, was if I was going to make it off there without falling. Okay, we're also going to see if I can. All right. Well, again, my name is Juliet Oliver. I'm a deputy district attorney in the Orange County DA's office. And I want to say first and foremost, thank you so very much for having me this afternoon and for being here to listen to this particular topic. I'm honored to get to be invited to speak today and to be able to sit alongside these amazing women in their leadership roles in their fields. And so thank you so much for being here. As you heard, I was in the human trafficking unit for 4 years in the district attorney's office until 2020. And at that time, I moved to the sexual assault unit of our office, which handles child sexual assault, child molestation, and adult sexual assault. And I did a lot of trainings, a lot of public conversations when I was in the human trafficking unit. And one of the biggest questions is how are our children being victimized by traffickers? How are they coming into the hands of these pimps and these traffickers, especially in our community? And we'd always answer, it's our most vulnerable youth, right? We would talk about how the pimps and the traffickers know how to capitalize on the vulnerabilities of our most disadvantaged, most vulnerable, most hurting youth. And I would say in those trainings, in those meetings, in those community conversations, that those were children who had suffered child sexual abuse, that they had been victims of child molestation in the home, outside of the home, by trusted family members, caregivers, other what they thought were reliable, caring adults in their lives. And that was that part of that conversation for me, was that is one aspect of how our children become vulnerable and ultimately how they are victims to those traffickers and to those pimps and to the exploiters. But now I sit in a role where I see those children who are being molested, who are being abused by family members, by caretakers, by the internet, by by the phones that they're given for very innocent reasons. And then to compound that with what we all know is happening with the internet and with phones that we never had to deal with as children. And then on top of that, a global pandemic. And you wonder what these children are suffering, that they ultimately are in a place where they are being victimized and they don't even know it at the beginning. And so now I find myself in this unique position where I've watched as those children who have the history of child sexual assault and abuse, the history of children who have had to go into the dependency, the foster care system because of that abuse, because of that neglect or that exploitation, and they find themselves continuing to be abused and neglected. How do we actually prevent those? How do we prevent the child abuse, the child sexual assault? How do we prevent the children from going into the dependency and the foster care system in the first place? And that's a huge question. And I promise you, I don't have the answer to that while I sit up here for 15 minutes. But I can promise you that I want to try. And I know each of you are in here because you want to try too. And when I think about vulnerabilities to child molestation, to child sexual abuse, and vulnerability to trafficking, the thing that sits at the heart of both of those is a child's innate desire for love, for attention, for safety, for community, for support, to feel special, to feel like someone cares about me and what I do and what I make of myself in this place, that I'm pretty, that I'm handsome, all, like I said, the innate desires of children, the things that they should want, that we expect them to want. And that as parents, as caregivers, as adult community members, we want to be able to provide that too. But somehow there is that gaping hole for some, because that's the gaping hole that is being capitalized on, right? That is how these children become prey to the exploiters, to the traffickers, to the predators of child molest and child sexual assault. When we talk about child sexual assault and child molest, 90%, over 90% of offenders, of predators, are known to the victim. We think of the scariest stories, right? That almost in like the same as the human trafficking context. When we talk about human trafficking, people think of children being snatched off the street, thrown in a truck, going across state lines, which if you're here, it's probably not the first time you're hearing about human trafficking. So you know that that is a misconception. Well, there's also that misconception with child sexual assault and abuse, that yes, of course it could be the stranger. It could be that weird person at the park who snatches away a child or meets them in the bathroom and does something predatory. But that's not the majority. The majority is the adults in these children's lives that they think that they can have the support, the care, the love, and the safety from. And to imagine the adults in their lives that they think that's what they're getting is then abusing them, is then molesting them, how are they supposed to respond? They respond with shame, with grief, with feelings of complete fault, without any understanding of what they're supposed to do or where they're supposed to go. Unfortunately, as I see in my work now, many of these children who do report, first of all, so many don't ever, as we know, ultimately report. And those that do, many of those do late. Only in adulthood do they recognize what was wrong. Or only in adulthood do they meet someone or have an experience where they finally have the courage and the strength to come forward. And the hardest part about my job is it could be too late. Too late for me as a prosecutor to be able to do something about it. And that's the hardest part for me. So why do we have those children who don't speak up, who can't speak up? Because we're talking about, of course, the most intimate of topics. like I said, that then involves shame and guilt. And those children that do have the courage to say something, sometimes it's to the wrong audience, to a parent who doesn't want to believe them, to a parent who shames them, who guilts them, who says, you can't talk about that, that will break up our family. You can't talk about that. How do you think we're getting food on the table? Don't you ever talk about that again. You must have been dreaming. That didn't really happen. How is a child supposed to react when the adults, when the caregivers, the ones they want for love and support, don't believe them or don't encourage them to come forward to law enforcement or to other reliable family members or other community sources? Of course, they end up in that place, like I mentioned, of being vulnerable for love and attention and someone who is going to care and believe them and give them that feeling of love. And by the time they have been sexually abused, by the time they're in the hands of a trafficker or an exploiter, it's too late. They already have the wrong image in their mind by that point of what that feeling of love and security is. So again, it comes down to the big question of how do we prevent this in the first place? And I echo the thoughts that you heard at the beginning of this hour, which is we can't just sit in a room and talk about how we prevent this with our children. We have to talk to our children. And as a mother of 3 children, again, I will be the first to tell you, those are not easy conversations. And I don't want to suggest to you that they are, but we have to have them. For those of you who are parents of children who drive, I bet you sat in the car with them, you watched them drive around the neighborhood right next to them. And you told them what to do if they come across a red light, they come across somebody running a red light, or what happens if they get in a car accident, what you want them to do, what you want them to say, because heaven forbid there came that time where you have to hand them the keys alone and you have to let them drive. But you told them everything you could to prepare them for the instance that they were going to be in alone and what to do. That's how we should be treating prevention to child abuse, child sexual abuse, and to exploitation. We have to talk to them. We have to give them every single tool in their little glove box, right? Their own little glove box. We have to tell them, I am here to talk to you. This is wrong. If somebody touches you in this way, this is wrong. If somebody asks you for a nude photograph on the internet, that is wrong. And I want you to know, sweetheart, that you can always come to me, that you can always talk to me, and it will never be your fault. Because at the bottom line, at the root of all of this is shame and is guilt, is disgust, feelings that if I tell my parent, if I tell my caregiver, if I tell my teacher, my counselor, are other students gonna know? Are my friends gonna know? Is my brother gonna know? What are they gonna think of me? And what did I do to deserve this? This must be my fault. So have those conversations with our children in whatever capacity we work or live with those children. They're not easy conversations, but we have to have them at the time that you think that it's appropriate to do that with a child. To be able to talk about even elementarily, like these are the parts of your body that are yours alone. Nobody gets to touch those. Open that dialogue, normalize that dialogue so that when it happens, that they can come home and say, somebody did this to me today, or somebody asked me for a picture of this today. And that works in 2 ways to prevent everything that we're talking about here. Of course, it educates our children to be able to then know, oh, this is what I do if this happens. I'm able to go and talk about it with my teacher, my counselor, my parent. But just the fact alone of taking the time to have the conversation with the child speaks volumes. It says to that child, I care about you. I love you. I don't want anybody to do anything to you. And that I am your safe place. And if something happens, you can come and talk to me. And that child can walk away going, Mommy loves me. Mommy cares about me. Again, or teacher or counselor or friend at church, wherever it may be. That feeling at the end of the day is what is going to help our children feel strengthened and supported and open. And then have those conversations that are simply, how was your day? Who did you hang out with? Oh, who are you talking to on that? Who are you talking to at recess? Or when they finally have phones, who are you communicating with? It's of course a whole nother conversation to talk about specifically the internet and phones and how that is a huge predator in and of itself, and the things that we can do to prevent abuse coming into our children's lives in that way and blocking their ability to talk to strangers and things like that. A conversation for another day and a little bit that we got to talk about today. But I think that at the end of the day, at least for this short, brief 15 minutes of time that we get together, I want to end with one of the things I've already said, is that if we are going to talk about how to protect our children, we just have to start simply talking to them. So thank you so, so much.
Thank you very much. We have some questions from the audience, ladies, if I can bend your ear a tad. We'll start with it's like a statute of limitations question for sexual assault, sexual abuse. A lot of times people don't say anything for 5, 10, 15, 20 years. And then they suddenly either remember it or they're conscious of it. What is the statute of limitations? How does something like that work? They should be turning it on for you.
Hello? Okay. That is a great question, and sort of one of the things that we talked about it for a moment, of course, of late disclosures and if what we can do to prosecute, if at all. There are many different laws that dictate ultimately what the statute of limitations is on a particular offense. And it really depends on the age of at disclosure, the age when the abuse happened, what the abuse is, and then particular code sections dictate ultimately if we still have jurisdiction to be able to file charges. I will tell you that we are extremely lucky in the state of California that we do have great laws that support being able to prosecute even after very late disclosures. Some even have no statute of limitations. There are certain offenses that there is no statute of limitations, specifically if it is an offense punishable by life imprisonment, that we don't have an expiration of time. And then just depending on what the specific offenses are, some things are, they obviously, it goes down from there. But anything that is subject to sex offender registration carries a minimum statute of 10 years. And then there's, like I said, different code sections that go from there.
Great, thank you. I'm gonna throw this at you, Brooke, if I may. Much of the interaction in friend groups now is group chats and social media apps. So kids feel, and so, you understand that that's how they're getting connected with each other, if you will, engaging with each other. By the same token, by disconnecting them, you have to balance. How do you balance disconnecting them when they're going to feel left out of the peer group and they're not going to have the same, I'm I'm trying to reword this question, and the same ability to interact with their peer and, get those socialization skills they need as well?
That's a really great question. And gosh, it's hard to parent in the digital age, isn't it? So I would say when it comes to parental controls, because essentially that's kind of the theme here, like how much do we lock things down? How much do we prevent kids from access to these types of things? It's tricky. I would say for younger ages, you need to think about what their skill level and what they're capable of having access to. So while I can't sit here and dictate what any particular family should do in terms of device access, be mindful of what conversations you've had with them, what you've taught them, and what skills they have before you give them the device, right? So you talked about driving a car. We don't put a kid in the car and tell them to drive without teaching them. So if you're going to give them access to social media as they get older, make sure you've had the conversations about healthy online relationships, what unhealthy ones look like, protecting other people's private images, and the red flags when someone's trying to take you off of a group chat into a one-on-one conversation and try to take advantage of you. So it's just about coupling those that continuous access, which I think is a healthy way to continue to grow and learn, coupling those with the conversations and the learning that they need to operate at that whether it's a group chat or social media or phone. Make sure you're having those conversations first.
Thank you, Brooke. And a lot of the questions that you're sending to us now have to deal with how do we balance that need for technology or that use of technology with, proper socialization of our children and how things are going. So I'm not going to ask a lot of those questions independently. It seems what you're saying, I won't put words in your mouth, so call me on it if I'm out of control here. That really teaching them up front how to use and what the proper boundaries are for those devices, and maybe even using apps to help reinforce those boundaries so their curiosity doesn't get the best of them, seems to be the best way. Basically, education, awareness, and just put up those boundaries until they're old enough to be able to make smarter and more intelligent decisions about what's appropriate, what's not appropriate.
Yeah, it's building those skills over time and making sure they're ready for it when you give it to them, right? And I think what you said was really great. We just have to drill into their heads that it's never their fault if someone betrays them, shares their information, tricks them online. That shame and blame is so critical. So in addition to giving them the skills, laying that foundation of trust so that if things go sideways, they know they can come to you for help.
Thank you. Christine, for you, final question, because we got to get going. We're a little bit late. I apologize for the timing. Which organizations, are there other organizations besides, social services that are responsible for helping children or helping families reconnect or move themselves through the criminal justice system or just the social services system? Or are you at the SSA like the primary only place you go for these types of services?
Great question. Well, social services really deals with the juvenile court system. So in terms of providing families assistance, we link and partner with many community agencies that are able to help families resolve their individual needs. And it's very different. Our role is to case manage. Our role is to also provide resources and services and monitor the safety of the children so that we can either return them or keep them in their home. And a part of that too is the communication part. We've both presenters also talked about the importance of talking to your children. That's a part of the social worker's role also in terms of working with the family. So it is a big part of the conversation. But we partner with many agencies in the community in order to provide services and resources to families because we can't do it alone.
I apologize because you have a lot of great questions here. I don't want to shortchange anybody. However, what we're going to ask our panelists to do, if we could provide those questions to them and they can potentially answer them at a later point, and then we'll post those questions, those responses to you. That's what we're going to do. I owe you, well, you're not going to, I owe you something. Let's go to 3:30. We have our final plenary, I believe. So let's everyone take a break, grab something to drink, just stretch your legs. And I will see you back here at 3:30 with our final plenary. Thank you, ladies, so much for sharing your time today.